This is Rosen Institute's Your Law Firm, where Lee Rosen and Ned Days cover management, marketing, finance, and new technologies for building the practice you deserve. Here's Lee Rosen.
It's good to be with you today from Bangkok, Thailand, which has really become our home away from home to the extent that anywhere is our home. We have spent quite a bit of time here over the past few years, and both of our kids are living here now, so it's really the perfect place for us to visit and to hang out. Bangkok is one of several places that we have visited repeatedly over the years. So at this point, we know our way around the city and we have preferences for restaurants and hotels and neighborhoods. And we know some people here, and it has just become very comfortable to us. So it's good to be back in Bangkok.
It's time for your tech tip. I don't know about you, but I am an absolutely disgusting creature, secreting all kinds of vile fluids and emulsions. And I know this because they end up all over my devices. Now get your mind out of the gutter. I am talking about my spittle-flecked notebook monitor, dusty keyboard, greasy phone screen, and waxy earbuds. We like to think of our tech and gadgets as magical, robotic, germ-free miracles of engineering, but the truth is they are gross because we are gross, and we're constantly touching them to our gross bits. In addition to being gross, I am also kind of lazy, so I'm not going to propose that you institute an hour-long daily ritual to purify your devices. But beyond making them less icky for our own health and safety, keeping your devices clean is a good way to prolong their effectiveness. The fewer flat whites you spill on your MacBook keyboard, the longer it will last. Not that I know anything about that from personal experience. So if we are going to get serious and upgrade from napkins and paper towels, what is required to actually clean our devices? Thankfully, the essentials are pretty basic. A microfiber cloth, a soft bristled toothbrush, isopropyl alcohol, and ideally an air duster. You are probably familiar with cans of compressed air. Several years ago, air dusters started becoming popular. These are battery-powered, rechargeable units that don't require canisters at all. They used to be fairly pricey, but you can now find them on Amazon starting at around $20. The most obvious use case for these is cleaning your keyboard, which is where we will start. More traditional keyboards with those clickety-clackety keys are obviously a little easier to clean because there's more room to work with. The keys are usually removable, and because they are generally disconnected from the device, it's fairly easy to turn them upside down and shake them. A few blasts of air and a couple of minutes with a cotton swab, maybe dabbed in isopropyl alcohol if there's something particularly gnarly in there, is usually all it takes to get these in decent shape. Lower profile keyboards become a little bit trickier. Apple actually has a support document on their preferred at-home method. This involves tilting the keyboard or notebook at a 75-degree angle, spraying compressed air in a zigzag pattern, and rotating the keyboard or notebook, then repeating the dusting process. That's obviously a little bit fiddly. Depending on the situation, a soft bristled brush may help, and a quick wipe with a lightly damp microfiber cloth should work too. Now, since you are likely to tap a bunch of keys in the process, it goes without saying that the device should be turned off. That isn't always convenient, though, and if you are willing to take the risk, there are some utilities out there that will lock your keyboard if you want to clean it while the device is on. Cleanly is a $1 utility for the Mac that does this. I couldn't find a similar tool for Windows. Some people suggest removing the keyboard as a device in your system settings, then adding it back when you're done cleaning. That sounds kind of terrifying and like it's asking for trouble to me, but maybe you like to live on the edge. Thankfully, the notebook screen is a little less challenging. Again, you should technically turn off the device, but I'm certainly not going to tattle on you if you don't. It's generally best to wipe off any big patches of dust or grime with a dry microfiber cloth. You can then dampen the cloth with either distilled water, which doesn't have the mineral deposits a lot of tap water does, or a half-and-half mix of water and isopropyl alcohol. Wiping in a circular motion tends to work best on notebook screens, and that should take care of even fairly stubborn greasy spots and fingerprint smudges. It's worth keeping part of the microfiber cloth dry so that you can then dry the screen if necessary. And don't spray anything directly on the screen, wet the cloth instead. That way you don't run the risk of overdoing it and watching beads of liquid make their way straight down into the air vents or screen hinge. And remember to clean those air vents if your notebook has them. A lot of recent MacBook Airs and some ARM-based Windows devices don't have fans for cooling. The processors run fairly cool, and they just throttle down performance if the temperature goes beyond a certain threshold. But for devices that do have fans, keeping the vents clean with compressed air and a soft bristled brush not only looks tidier, but it improves the airflow and allows your computer to run at an appropriate temperature. It uses the fan less, and it generally prolongs the lifespan of the device. As with the rest of these though, it's best to do this while the device is off, and don't block the vents while it's running for obvious reasons. Moving on to our smaller but possibly grosser devices, mobile phones tend to be pretty straightforward with fewer moving parts and no keyboard. When we talked about notebook screens, I mentioned using distilled water or diluted isopropyl alcohol. You don't want to use anything that's harsh or abrasive, and that's just as true for your mobile device. Modern mobile phones actually include an oleophobic coating on the screen. This is a substance that repels oily smudges and fingerprints, which is why our phone screens usually look fairly clean even though we're touching them all day. But that can be stripped off if you use abrasive cleaners, even if you don't end up scratching the sapphire glass itself. So the same damp microfiber cloth approach applies here. Thankfully, most modern phones are reasonably water resistant, so while I wouldn't suggest that you submerge it, you don't have to be quite as careful as you would with a notebook when it comes to moisture. If you have your phone in a case, remove that and clean it separately. The one thing that can be a little tricky is the charging port. I have on several occasions had phone charging ports become so stuffed with pocket lint that the charging cable would no longer connect. You should not do what I do and use a bent paper clip or safety pin. Using any metal to scrape out the charging port runs the risk of damaging the connectors and the pins inside. Your best course of action is to start with compressed air and then try a toothpick or plastic dental pick if you have one that will fit. Older iPhone Lightning ports were just an empty socket, so it was a little easier to scrape lint out. The USB-C ports on Android devices and more modern iPhones are a little bit trickier. USB-C has a metal prong in the middle of the port, making it tough to get in there with all but the thinnest tools. You're probably better off taking preventative measures and routinely air dusting your phone's port so that you don't have to resort to more drastic measures later. And that brings us to our wireless earbuds. The same tools and practices apply here. Most earbuds have removable silicone ear tips. These can be removed and cleaned with regular old soap and water, left to dry and reinstalled. If they are particularly nasty, it's easy to find replacements, especially when it comes to super popular options like AirPods and Galaxy Buds. There are tons of third-party replacement ear tips that you may actually prefer to the stock options. You might find that they fit better or sound better, but you can often find OEM replacement tips for just about every kind of earbud if yours have become too gross to save. The underlying speaker ports beneath the ear tips usually have some kind of mesh that occasionally gets a little waxy. Isopropyl alcohol and a cotton swab should do the trick here. Just remember to let them dry. And clean out the case too. I never really looked at my charging case until recently, and down in the little crevice where the ear tips rest was kind of gross, so clean that out too. Now, lastly, you've probably seen UV disinfectant devices around for sterilizing your phone and earbuds. UV sanitizing does work. It's used in hospital and medical applications. A lot of these inexpensive consumer devices for your phone or small electronics tend to err on the side of shorter cycles for convenience than you would probably want to be super thorough. So using the longest setting, or even just doing 2 cycles if you really want to be safe, is probably a good idea. But remember, these are just sanitizing, not cleaning. They aren't removing any of the gunk. In fact, if you have a big glob of earwax on something, the UV light won't get through that, and it will be just as germy underneath as it was before you put it in the UV device, so you still need to clean. Whether the extra disinfecting of a UV device is worth it is up to you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I am going to attempt to pry a chunk of Sour Patch Kids out of my phone's charging port with the sharp end of a kitchen knife. I'm Ned Days, and that's your tech tip.
And now for your moment of concise advice. Picture this. You're about to step into the ring for the big fight. You've trained, you're prepared, and you've psyched yourself up for months. But just before the bell rings, you realize that your trainer forgot to mention one crucial move. Now, instead of dancing around the ring with confidence, you're stumbling and second-guessing and praying for a miracle. That's what it feels like when you hand a case off to someone on your team without proper delegation. I once handed a case off a week before trial to an associate, and I wanted the associate associate to get that case all set so that I could walk into the courtroom and try the case using the materials that they pulled together. And I thought I'd given the associate plenty of time to get the prep work done. And so I didn't check in. I didn't provide detailed instructions. I just tossed the file over like a hot potato. And then the night before the trial, I sat down to look at what I got back from the associate. And let's just say that panic, it set in faster than you can say last-minute disaster. I had to spend all night fixing the file in order to get it ready for the trial. I was fueled by coffee and sheer panic. And then the next morning, by some stroke of luck, we walked into the courthouse, and within an hour, we had settled the case. I had been just one sleepless night away from what would have been a professional disaster for me and a complete disaster for my client. But here's the thing. I had to learn the hard way that delegation, it isn't just about handing off tasks and hoping for the best. It's about setting your team up for success from the very beginning. Let's look at that. Let's break that down. What does it mean? What does it look like to set your team up for success? Well, first, comprehension. You need to make sure that your instructions, they are crystal clear. You want to put yourself in the shoes of your team member. You want to hear it the way they are hearing it. Think through what it is that they need to know in order to succeed. Explain all of it to them. Explain the project with context. Why? Why are they doing this? How does it fit into the bigger picture? It's like giving someone a map and showing them not just the destination, but all the landmarks along the way. With that sort of approach, they can navigate their path and they can make decisions with the bigger picture in mind. So you want to make sure they have complete comprehension of what's happening. The next thing you want to do is increase buy-in. You need to get your team excited about the project. I think that a big part of delegating anything is about selling the work to the person who's going to do it. I know it's tempting to say, that's why I pay them. And yes, that is why you pay them, but they also need to be enthusiastic about the work you're handing off. Show them how it is that the work they are doing matters, why it makes a difference, how it contributes to the law firm's success and to the client's satisfaction. People are a lot more motivated when they see the impact of their efforts. Share how the work you are assigning to them aligns with their career goals. Make the work sound as fun and rewarding as possible. When you get your team members invested in what they're doing, they're going to give it their all, and that's what you need. De-risking. That's what comes next. You want to address the obvious risks up front. What is it that's likely to go wrong for the person doing the work? How can we prevent that from happening? Think of it as troubleshooting the problem before the problem even arises. That sort of proactive approach, it saves you from those 3 a.m. fire drills. Share your past experiences like the all-nighter fiasco that I went through. Use them as learning points, as teachable moments. Embrace a healthy sense of paranoia. They say that only the paranoid survive, and I agree with that. If you de-risk, if you explain the risks up front, you use that paranoia to your benefit. And then confirm alignment. Make sure that everybody is on the same page. Communication is key here. After you've explained everything, stop and ask your team members to repeat back what it is that they've heard. This is not patronizing. It's ensuring that everyone is on the same page. Ask them what is confusing. You'll hear it when they repeat it back. Encourage them to ask questions. Get their initial reactions to the work. The goal here is to clear up any misunderstandings before they get busy with the project. And then finally, shorten the feedback loops. You want to check in early and often. Don't wait until the deadline to see the first draft. Set a timeline for follow-ups and stick to it, and make those follow-ups more frequent than you probably think they need to be. This way, you'll catch any deviations early and you can course correct without that major last-minute stress. You want to keep that feedback loop tight and continuous so that there's no room for misinterpretation. Everybody needs to stay on the path. You know, mastering the art of delegation, it isn't just about passing off the tasks. It's not simply about handing the work off so that it's off your plate. No, it's about ensuring that your team understands the mission, that they feel invested in the outcome, that they know how to avoid the pitfalls, and that they have the opportunity to clarify their doubts and get their questions answered. It's about building a smooth and efficient machine where everyone knows their role and how it fits into the bigger picture. This kind of approach, it not only saves you from sleepless nights, but it also builds a stronger, more competent team, and it prepares them to have an even easier time the next time you delegate a project. So the next time you hand off a project, remember clarity, excitement, risk management, alignment, and feedback loops. These are your tools for effective delegation. Use them well, and you'll see your practice thrive without the midnight panic attacks. That's your moment of concise advice. Wrapping up from Bangkok, thanks for spending a few minutes with me and Ned today. We hope you have a great weekend and an even better week next week. Keep plugging away, moving forward, and getting things done. You're on the right track. You'll get there. I promise. We're all in this together, and together we build better practices through better marketing, better management, and better technology. Until next time, I'm Lee Rosen.
Thanks for listening to Your Law Firm. Subscribe to the Friday File at roseninstitute.com and join thousands of lawyers focused on working on, instead of in their practices. You'll find safe, successful, actionable approaches for transforming your firm. Sign up for free at roseninstitute.com.